in the end, and this is a paraphrase of two questions. In the end, doesn't it begin and end with justice, and justice for the individual? And people say, we haven't heard real talk about justice and how we assure minimal justice for people who we expect to act, you know, in the rational ways you just described. How can we do that, and if we don't, can we really make any progress? And I guess the example, they don't give the example, but the one which shocks me is we just recently, a government in Guinea, its soldiers raped hundreds of women in public in a stadium, and yet it is still a recognized government by the international community. So these people are saying, if we can't deal with individual justice, does it mean anything to the individual, or is this just high talk? And can we deal with individual justice? Mr. Barrister, can I begin with you?
I can't see how we would expect to ever build a secure world without giving due attention to a fundamental principle of life, which is justice. And it's not to say that we haven't made huge efforts over centuries, over millennia, to fashion this principle, but it's going to require from us huge efforts to fashion structures, processes that administer justice. But we have to internalize that balance within ourselves. We have to know how that looks in terms of our own individual relationships and how, if you like, our interests of the individual are inextricably linked with the interests of society. That is one of the things that justice ultimately teaches us, and find mechanisms that of consultation and of decision making that lead to just outcomes and just decisions. I think these are deeply moral, if you like, spiritual matters. Yes, it does take legal form, it crystallizes into legal norms, but these are moral issues for individuals to work through, and for communities to work through, and for nations to work through, and for the body of nations to work through.
Let me just address this on two levels. The first one is justice within communities and states and nations. And that comes about if there's real participation of the citizens in the governance. And the only way you insist that judges are not appointed because they're going to respond to the head only is to have citizen participation. In this country, it's the confirmation process, which is citizen participation. You might argue that some people got through, shouldn't have gotten through, and vice versa. But it does help bring about a justice system that people can rely on. But the more difficult question is the international question. You mentioned Guinea, but it's Darfur, it was Rwanda, and that requires the nations to empower the United Nations to act. If we go back and look at each one of these instances, the Congo, Darfur, had there been more power within the United Nations to act, if the veto power of Russia and China did not exist, there would have been a greater ability on the part of the international community to stop the people are offended, but the genocide in Darfur. So what I'm saying is that justice exists when there's citizen participation and when there's power. And there has to be, on the international scene, more power in the hands of our international organization. And let's not talk about starting from scratch. We've got the UN, we need to make the UN work. And I just think that there needs to be more commitment on the part of the major powers, including the US, to engage with the UN and to ensure the UN has power. If the US holds back on its funding of the UN, it reduces the UN's ability to act. And yes, that's a way of ensuring that the UN does what we want them to do, but is that often in the best interest of the world? That's a question.
Any other comments on this?
I would say we need to review the concept of sovereignty, because oftentimes the state raise that flag, what happens inside my borders is my business. However, I think time has come where we need to acknowledge that it's not that state's business, it's the business of the entire world. And there should be minimum standards. Thank you so much. I think there are minimum standards that should be met now. I don't believe that after that long period that we come about, rape should occur, or genocide, or torture, or any sort of these things, or oppression. It is time. I believe it's time.